Okay then. So today's lesson is lesson 2, synapses and the reflex arc. So yesterday we talked about homeostasis and we talked about the pathway for nervous responses and the nervous pathway, that we start with stimulus, which was a change in the environment. This was picked up by a receptor, which was a cell that detects a change. It was then passed via the sensory neuron, so the impulse is carried up the sensory neuron to the central nervous system. And the central nervous system is the brain and the spinal cord. Within the brain and the spinal cord, there are relay neurons. Then we have a motor neuron, which again carries the impulse, but this time the impulse is going to an effector, which is either a muscle or a gland, which then carries out a response. Now, in between all of these neurons, so we have our 3 different types. We have sensory, relay, and motor neuron. So in between neurons, we have synapses. So our synapses. Now, a synapse is a gap between the end of one neuron and the start of another. Okay, so if we say that here we have the end of neuron 1 and this is the start of neuron 2. The space in between here and here is the synapse. Now, electrical impulses that are carried by the neurons, so we said the sensory neuron and we've said the motor neuron carries the impulses. These impulses are electrical. However, when it gets to this gap, an electrical impulse, there you go, I've just moved down, Martha, I just realised that you weren't seeing it. So the electrical impulse cannot travel across this gap. Okay, so what we have to do, what the body has done, is figured out a way to transmit the signal across the gap, but it can't do it electrically. So what it does is it uses a chemical, and this chemical is known as a neurotransmitter. Okay, so a neurotransmitter chemical. Now, what happens is the end of synapse 1 receives the electrical signal. This then causes the neurotransmitter. Light went off there a second, sorry guys. So this then causes, this electrical signal causes the neurotransmitter to be released. And so what happens is it is released into the synapse. So electrical signal causes chemical release. So we now have the neurotransmitter in the synapse. So how does it travel across the synapse? It diffuses. So neurotransmitter diffuses across the synapse. When it reaches neuron 2, what happens is the neurotransmitter will stimulate an electrical response. So here we have neurotransmitter stimulates electrical response. And then the electrical signal carries on until it reaches the next synapse, and then the process will start again. And then the next synapse, and the process will start again. Okay, so synapses are the gaps between one neuron and another, and they allow the transmission of a signal by transferring an electrical signal into a chemical signal that diffuses across the synapse. Okay, so that's synapses. I'll leave that there for a few seconds for everybody to have a look at. And then we'll turn over and we'll start doing about the reflex arc. Okay, so reflexes. Reflexes keep you safe. That is why we have them. Okay, and the way they do this is because they are fast. And the reason they are fast is because they bypass your conscious, I can spell it right, conscious brain. In other words, you do not think. Your body just reacts. So we all know about the knee-jerk response when you hit the sensitive spot just below your knee, your pupils dilating when light changes. So if I touch my light again, your pupils will have changed and altered every time I have done that to accommodate the levels of light going into your eye. When you are going into shock and your body releases adrenaline, when you blink because something is going to hit you or you're trying to protect your eyes, all of those are reflex reactions. Now, a reflex reaction happens in a very similar way to the nervous pathway in that we have a stimulus, which is again a change in the environment. The receptor picks it up. The sensory neurons send a message. But what happens at the next stage is different. Whereas previously, you would go to the central nervous system and to the motor neurons. All that happens here is that you go to a relay neuron. Okay. And from there, you then go back to a motor neuron. This travels down to the effector, and then the response is provided. So the main difference is here. There is no central nervous system involvement. It is a relay neuron, which, yes, is affected or is part of the central nervous system within the brain, but the brain isn't involved here. It's bypassed. It's literally one relay neuron and then back to the motor neurons. If you have your revision guides, you have a nice coloured image of this. This one, the example given here is the bee sting. So a cheeky bee stings your finger, stimulus of the pain receptor, impulse travels along the sensory neuron, impulse is passed along a relay neuron, okay, travels down the motor neuron, reaches the muscles, your muscles contract away from the bee. Okay, so no brain, no major spinal cord involvement. It literally is missing out all of that part. So because you don't have to think about it, it's quicker. I mean, your responses of your nervous system are quick anyway, but the reflex arc is that much quicker than the actual nervous pathway response as we did here. Okay, And as I said, the reason for these is to help prevent injury. Now, that's page 60 in your revision guide if you wish to look at it.